I'm Gail Ecker. I'm Director of Equine Guelph, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. I have a special guest I'd like to introduce to you. This is Mike King of CapriCMW Insurance. Mike, thank you so much for coming with us today.
I'm glad to be here, Gail. Nice to see you again.
Mike, you have been a horse owner all your life, and now you're in the insurance business. Can you give us a bit of a history on your horse ownership and where you are now?
Sure. And I regret I'm not a horse owner now, but certainly have been for many years of my life. And like so many folks, I started in the horse industry as a teenager. Got my introduction to the horse industry at a trail riding facility, and then at a lesson barn, and after school, mucking out for lessons and doing all kinds of things, and eventually got into the industry and was privileged to work on a pretty significant facility in Maple, Ontario, where we had 60 odd horses and a string of schoolies, and sort of helped to manage that herd and the facility. I've been in the insurance industry now since 1993, and since that time have specialized all of my work in the horse sector. I'm now responsible for our programming on a variety of programs, a variety of insurance products from coast to coast in Canada. Lucky to be a partner with Equine Guelph for education, and as Gail would know, teach some courses, or at least show up as a guest expert or guest voice on many of the courses at Equine Guelph. And we're delighted to be here today to talk about current issues in the horse industry.
Great. Okay, so thank you for that. I just want people to realize, as you said, you've walked the walk here too. You're well versed in some of the challenges that are facing the industry right now. So
absolutely.
Okay, so this learning community that we've pulled together is all about bringing people working together and pulling together to help riding schools at this time. And it's a way that we can look at this to find solutions to help each other. So just wondering what issues you're seeing out there.
Well, like everyone else, we're seeing certainly a change in how businesses of all stripes or all types are being allowed to operate in the horse industry from coast to coast. Riding instruction is, of course, a foundational income stream for many businesses and operations in the country. And it's been very disruptive. No one saw this coming. March will forever be remembered as the time when the government said to us across the entire globe, stop moving, stay in your house, stay on your couch, which caused, of course, an immediate disruption in income streams, business operations, relationships with staff at barns, how to manage their herd. Seeing the things that are very real across the industry, and it's been very enlightening for me over these last several weeks to hear the anxiety in people's voices as I talk to coaches and facility operators. In our organization, we have staff both here in Ontario and out in British Columbia that look after the provincial equine associations from coast to coast, and quite literally thousands of coaches and facility operators. And since COVID sort of became our life, I've been the pointy end of the stick on COVID inquiries, quite purposely, so that we have some consistency in the advice and information we're able to share, but also to hear what's going on in the industry. And what I'm hearing is that the industry is certainly being challenged right now on a number of fronts.
So yes, many riding schools have seen their revenue drastically decreased, in some cases totally decreased, and owners are understandably trying to save money where they can. I've been told that some school owners have discontinued paying for all of their insurance coverage, and I just wanted to, sort of alert people. Let's talk about the pros and cons of that approach for saving money.
Sure. So what I've been saying to folks, and it's a great question, Gail, because it is one that comes up a lot, as people will know that are listening to this, that insurance premiums or insurance policies are typically issued on an annualized basis with an inception date and a renewal date. And for those folks that are sort of midterm in their policies at this moment in time. They're having to make business decisions about where they can reduce some expense. The way that we as an industry look at liability insurance particularly, we have a tendency to have sort of these matrices of premium calculations that are not particularly complicated, frankly, or complex, but they're driven by revenue streams and the activity or operation that's being insured. And the larger the operation, number of horses in the school string, revenues that might be generated from riding instruction, the larger the premium. Just makes sense. It's all proportional. So for those folks that are sort of midterm in their policies, some have been given the opportunity, or at least have asked for the opportunity to get some relief when their riding instruction activities have been effectively stopped. So we've had some clients who will take their insurance for riding instruction as a line item out of their policy for the time being and take whatever credit that can be provided to them by the insuring company. That's a reasonable strategy as long as there's a very clear understanding of when operations do resume, even in a very small way. It's imperative that that business operator then reach back to their provider to say, oh, by the way, I've got lessons coming up again this Saturday. Government has allowed me to do private lessons or semi-private lessons or some other thing. So even though my incomes have continue to be depleted and will probably only very slowly and gradually rise again, I need that coverage inherently for that operation and that exposure. So it's imperative that we have that communication. For other clients that are in the renewal process at this particular moment in time, we've had lots of customers who just say, look, when I look forward over this next year, I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what my operation is going to look like. What I do know is in the short term, riding instruction, running horse shows, clinics, and other activities that I ran last year, day camps, are off the table for the time being. We don't know if our local government is going to allow us to do some of those things, all of those things, or some sort of a modified version of what they were last year. And until they do tell us those things, we don't want that coverage to be provided to us, which again is fine as long as that communication remains open. And so when those operations do become viable or present, that they've reached back to their provider to have those coverages put back in place. What I will say as well is that typically on these farms, not all the coverage needs to be or should be canceled. The fact of the matter is that these facility owners still own the horses. The horses are still present and can still do the silly things that horses do, can kick someone or bite someone or escape onto the roadway and go for a walk, and do all the things that might present a liability exposure. They still own the land and buildings that where these operations are operating from, and so they still have that premises exposure if a guest did come to the property. So we want to be careful that we're not canceling policies entirely for the sake of doing it, that we're simply reducing the coverage to be more reflective of the current situation, and then building out from there as time goes forward. That is a far more effective strategy. Still provides some relief in terms of cost overhead, but is still going to protect the basic interests of the individual operator.
Right, which is so important because
Indeed.
Despite the COVID-19, there are other things that can happen, as we've seen with barn fires and other horrible things that have piled on top. So
yeah, and I should mention that as well about property insurance, Gail. I didn't mean to exclude that. It's been so much about liability coverages these days, but you're quite correct. What we certainly don't want is someone to assume that if they're paying a premium for farm property insurance that they can afford to take that policy off the table. In fact, they may have a legal obligation to maintain that policy if they have a mortgage or some other interested party involved in the property itself on title. So it's, again, this is clearly down to having a conversation with your insurance provider to say, are there any extraneous items that I might want to take the full responsibility for and not defer it to an insurance company and save that little bit of money so that I can use that money for other purposes. Again, completely fair and reasonable conversation. I've had many of those. It's a great time to evaluate the policies that are in force and try and figure out from a consumer perspective how those premium numbers are built to get to the total that you pay at the end of the year. as most clients don't typically like to know all those details until they need to know. But this is a good time to look at those coverages that are needed and to perhaps consider other options for those things that can be put aside for now.
That's really good advice, and also a great segue into our next section, which is getting back to business. Because if there have been bits of the policy that have been dropped, now is the time to review that, because there are provinces that are opening up and opening up, parts of it.
Yeah.
So again, first steps with the opening should be to contact the insurance company again. Would that be correct?
Absolutely, and it's worth noting. I was just having a conversation just before you were in my discussion today with a coach, and I think there was a general sense in the marketplace that when COVID-19 became sort of a part of our world, that insurance policies were somehow interrupted, and that is absolutely untrue. It didn't happen. The insurance coverages that have been provided continue to provide that coverage, whether the operation has been interrupted or not. In other words, if I'm a coach and I bought a coach liability insurance policy in January, regardless of the presence of COVID-19, that policy has continued all the way through, because it's not an insurance issue. There's no clause in the insurance policies that say you're covered for everything except when COVID-19 exists. I mean, that simply does not exist. That wording does not exist. So many of the calls I've received are about that. It's sort of, well, can I start teaching now? Well, I don't know. Can you? And the fact is that the provincial health authorities in each of our various provinces and territories have made determinations in their own region about what is and what is not acceptable behavior, just as they did when they told us to all stay home on our couch. Here in Ontario, it's a very different environment. We're still restricted in theory to groups of no larger than 5. In many of the provinces now, it's up to 50. Many of the provinces didn't shut down particularly. They had guidelines or guidances, like in British Columbia, where they were just being asked very clearly by the provincial health authority to stay home and stay apart and so on, where in other provinces it was an emergency act and actually law. So it's been challenging to try and navigate through all this, and I can appreciate the confusion. It would have been great in hindsight, and perhaps governments will learn moving forward that a consistent message, frankly, across the entire Dominion would have been more helpful for everyone, so that we would all be sort of working at the same pace. But concentrations of population and the concentrations of people that have suffered from it are also relevant bits I appreciate. In any event, as we move forward, we have to continually say to our customers, and even those that are not our customers, but we get lots of those calls as well, to say, look, you desperately need to speak to a public health official. You need to follow their guidance, because ultimately their job is to make sure that we as citizens of this country remain safe. So if they say that your protocols as you move forward will include things that are consistent with the guidance being provided by Dr. Tam and the other health authorities across the country, then by all means follow their guidance. Stay within the confines of the rules that they're dictating you should follow. Be responsible in your business operations, because after all, we are in a customer-facing environment in that horse lesson space. So follow those guidances, and you should be fine. The insurance has been and will continue to be enforced for you, as long as you're not breaking the law. And that's true of all insurance policies. In the absence of breaking those laws, the policy will have to respond if there was a bodily injury or property damage claim arising from your riding instruction or the other operations that might occur on the farm.
So that's great advice for them when they're looking to open up things, to, again, just be very aware that they are following the rules, checking with their health authorities, yeah, to make sure, and double checking, if they've got questions, not assuming.
Oh, don't assume anything. And some of the conversations we've had have been surrounding things like personal protective equipment, and should the coach be wearing gloves, or should the coach be wearing a mask? And the answer to those things is probably, but again, not an insurance question, one for the public health authority. The ones that have had great success, Gail, frankly, are those that have come up with a strategy. I mean, there's tons of resource out there, and it can't be stated enough that there's lots of advice out there. Equine Guelph's got some fabulous stuff on their website. The provincial bodies have great stuff on their website. The equine associations like Ontario Equestrian. Equestrian Canada has some great information on their website. And these are guidelines. These are guidances that say these do make sense. These are consistent with what we collectively know about how to manage this to the best of our ability and to mitigate the risk of people around us. Should students be wearing masks? Well, I don't know. I mean, if a coach is in close quarters with a student, tightening a girth or adjusting a stirrup or some other thing that a coach might do, then is it responsible for them to be masked and gloved? Perhaps it is. Do we recommend that a riding student wear a mask while they're hyperventilating around the ring? Probably not, because but at that point they're certainly well separated from their coach and are probably pretty safe to be in that space. The one thing that I want to say here, and it perhaps be a little bit out of context, is when I'm speaking to coaches, I remind them that notwithstanding this new environment in which we are living right now, the coach is still ultimately responsible for the health and welfare of that student, for the health and welfare of people that are on the property, on the farm, regardless of the presence of COVID-19. So with COVID-19 now being an additional risk, an additional exposure, when they invite people into their space, they're taking on that responsibility to keep them safe as well. So the conversation, again, today, last week, it's happening all the time, is me asking coaches when I speak to them, say, okay, so let me try and put a scenario together. Mike King's riding and he's in a lesson with you. You're standing in the middle of the ring. We're certainly lots of distance apart. I've tacked up. I know how to do all those things. And I'm riding, and my horse spooks, and I come off, and I'm now a pile of bones in the corner of the arena. Do you rush in? Do you rush in knowing that I might have COVID-19? It's a hard question to answer. I've had some coaches say, well, of course I would. I'd be wearing a mask. I'd be wearing gloves. I understand my responsibilities as an equestrian professional. I know that I'm responsible for that bodily injury potentially. I have to make sure that Mike's okay. Other coaches have said, oh, shoot, I never thought of that. I had no sense that I would be responsible for rushing in and potentially exposing myself to this COVID-19. Seems like a fairly obvious question to me, but not necessarily an obvious answer. So I think coaches and other professionals have got to sort of balance this anxiety they're feeling right now to getting things back into a new environment with COVID-19 being present, recognizing that their responsibilities have not really changed. They've been enhanced, but they haven't really changed about maintaining or making sure that clients and customers are healthy and safe.
All right, so let's go on to the third phase of our interview, and I'm calling that coming out stronger, because this is not about going back to normal. There were things in normal that did not work, and so the opportunity here is, what can we do now as we're developing our plan to come out of this so that we can be more resilient, we can be a better business, we can just do better? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great point, Gail. I find myself having had all these hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations in these last several weeks with the horse industry that, as you've sort of alluded to, this is not about recovery anymore. I think it was about recovery in the first early few days when we had no idea of how long this might go on. But it is clearly now about change. So the mantra from this office is change, not recovery. So to your point, how do we manage those changes? How do we come out better, stronger, faster, bigger, and what have we? And it sounds all too cliche, but I think we've got to share some education. We've got to help business operators become better at what they do, better prepared for the next time, because there will be a next time, folks. It's just a reality. It may not be a COVID or a coronavirus. It might be some other thing that's affecting our client base. Could be strangles, could be some other thing that affects just my barn or my community or my region. Could be some other bio-risk hazard that we haven't even conceived of. And there needs to be a preparation plan and a preparedness strategy that just becomes the norm in the horse world, that frankly, for businesses like mine, businesses like yours, Gail, at the university, and institutions like it, there are preparedness plans. They're embedded in the cultures in our various sectors. And unfortunately, in the horse industry, they haven't been embedded. It's been sort of status quo, business as usual for so long now, that it's going to be a big challenge to try and get folks to embrace the fact that they truly are they can be economically viable, that they can show themselves as being positive contributors to the Canadian economy or the regional economies, that they can employ staff properly, that they can file tax returns and be registered businesses as they should be, to pay their share, as it were, but then receive the benefits of government support, which so many, unfortunately, were not eligible for during this pandemic because they, frankly, have fallen under the radar of government, perhaps consciously, sort of hiding from the reality of operating a business in the 21st century. So I see education as being a big part of this. I see offering business courses that are not difficult. We have learned and continue to learn the efficiencies of taking online education courses online, that we can do these literally 24/7. We're not bound to a schedule. We can still manage our herds and our farm businesses and our family responsibilities and find a couple of hours a week to better ourselves and elevate ourselves. I'm looking very much forward to those opportunities to talk to professionals that are committed to this industry, that want to find common language so that we can speak in a single voice. Gail, you and I go back a lot of years, and we've talked forever about the silos that exist in our industry and how this sector doesn't talk to that sector, and these breed disciplined folks don't talk to those breed disciplined folks. And frankly, I think, if nothing else, COVID-19 has shown us that, frankly, we're very much in this together, that we are a very singular community after all. And I can only imagine the great strengths that will come out of people breaking down some of those barriers and saying, you know what, it doesn't matter whether you have a Hanoverian or a quarter horse. My horse needs hay. My horse requires veterinarian care. I am a small business operator. My business is not really very different from any others. I have an income stream. I have an inventory of tools at my disposal to help me generate that income vis-a-vis the school horses themselves. I have to maintain that machinery, that infrastructure. I've got other expenses that are fixed that I know about. I've got contingencies for those things that I can't predict, but I know may happen to me, weather-related issues, hay shortages, staffing shortages, all those sort of things. So let's put some structure around this. Let's teach the people things that they don't know they need to even ask for. Again, I go back to the conversations I'm having with folks across the country, and I'm very, very aware of the fact that often they don't even know the questions to ask. They don't know that it's not impossible to register a small business for $500 or $600. That's it. It's done. It's not a thousands of dollars expense that requires lawyers and accountants and all manner of stuff. It can be done very, very quickly. Joining the Federations of Agriculture, joining in partnership with the provincial equine associations are very real, very affordable, and incredibly beneficial. Having that common voice will frankly bring us out of this much stronger. But it's going to take some work. We're prepared to put up our time and effort to help folks understand risk. Gosh knows, as a life learner, I continue to learn. I don't purport to know anywhere close to all of it, but I'm more than willing to learn because the resources are there. Equine Guelph's a great partner. This isn't a patronization or an ad, folks, but it's true. Equine Guelph has been incredibly supportive and incredibly innovative in the courses that they are bringing forward to the community. All you got to do is reach in and grab one, and there will be benefits that come from that. I'm sure of it.
Well, and you were with us when we started doing those business certificate courses. I don't even know how many years we've been doing them, 7 or 8 now. Yeah, a long time. We've been doing the online since 2002, and so partway along there, we pulled the business. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that was because at that time, I was seeing people get into the horse industry because we love horses. I want horses to be my life. but they wouldn't look at the business practices to make sure they were sustainable.
Right.
So have you seen anything in those courses that,
Oh my gosh! And the course offerings that we have, there's so much there. I think what the horse industry has allowed itself to do over time is they become very insular. It's very self-serving. It's very much, in some cases, very farm-centric. It's very family-centric. I appreciate that and respect that. I really do. It's foundational in our society. But it's not the same as it was 25, 30 years ago. It was a different time. There were just business decisions being made and how we related to our customers, and a seemingly endless supply of new customers if we made another client or an old client unhappy or whatever. Not the case now. We all have to try harder, and we have to work much harder at maintaining and building those relationships. One of the things that strikes me too is that when we're talking about customer facing stuff, and this is maybe a quick digression, Gail, but it's some of the things we've talked to coaches about during this interrupted period is, okay, so you can't put the kid in the tack. You can't do the traditional lesson, sit down, sit up straight, put your heels down. We get that. But what else have we got to offer? It surprises me how perhaps little coaches think that they have to offer, other than that sort of sit up straight with your heels down. What about their horse knowledge? What about their understanding of physiological requirements of the horse, physiological requirements of the athlete, the rider, how they could be simply engaging in communication, maintaining the customer relationship throughout this interruption, to talk about other means and ways to maintain the herd. I had one coach who did some video classroom stuff, which was so smart. These kids are at home, their students are at home still from school, and so they made arrangements with the parents that, Thursday afternoon, when the kid was supposed to be at the barn or would have otherwise been at the barn at 5 o'clock, the coach was going to do this sort of a session, a video Zoom session or some other thing, to talk about physiological things of the horse. They were engaging their clients. It was a two-way conversation in a group environment. They could do that, cost them nothing, and was a chargeable lesson, because the horse professionals that were doing these things were smart enough to recognize that they've got other education that they can offer. They've got things and tools and resources that they can give to their clients that go well beyond what the old ways were, or to direct them to an online course that might be of interest to them as youth or as adults, and then again taking advantage of those education opportunities themselves. But to elevate this sport is frankly what I think the biggest opportunity is right now. So online education is a key to this. We can't get together the way that we once did. Time is always of the essence. Travel is going to be a challenge for the foreseeable future. Even locally, it's a challenge. Where are we allowed to go? And I come down to see you in Guelph, Gail, and I want to stop and get a coffee and have a restroom break. Well, where do I do that on the way? Like, there's all these millions of considerations all of a sudden that we have to think about, and it's so much easier to do these things in an online platform where we can engage in conversations. I'm hoping that we have more big meetings. The technology allows for that, or presentations like this that are key, Q&A sessions, community building sort of environments. Those are all very key opportunities for me and for this industry, and that's how we're going to come out of this stronger. And we don't know when that's going to be. Gail and I were talking, for those that are listening before, and we were talking about the possibility of a vaccine. And I'm certainly not a medical person, but one wonders how many people will have to be vaccinated before this becomes something of the past. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure it's a whole bunch. And so the challenges are certainly still ahead of us. I don't think we're done yet, but we're going to be okay. We're all in this together. We're all available. Gail, you've certainly made yourself available. I'm available. Lots of other people that are committed to the industry are available. Everyone's a resource if they want to share.
And for sure, it's a good thing in our industry. We are seeing people coming together for that. And yes, at the end of the day, it's not only about the industry, it's also about the sustainability of the industry and the welfare of the horses. So if we can just touch on one last point, and you and I have talked many times about professionalism.
Yes.
And there's a difference between I'm a professional because I get paid to do this, and that makes me a professional, versus someone who is striving to always be a professional. So what are your comments for people that are now looking ahead to making their business better? What's the focus of their efforts on professionalism?
Well, sort of as I spoke to a moment ago. I mean, those coaches that have sort of the light bulbs going on in their brain, perhaps out of necessity. Maybe it's always been there, but just behind the wall, about sharing knowledge and information. I know some fantastically consummate horsemen and women that are have never learned how to communicate very well beyond sort of the things that they do every day. So they're stuck in this rut, if you will, of sort of always relying on the old ways and then wonder why they can't adapt. But the reality is that we're all very adaptable, as proven by the fact that billions of us, not millions, but billions of us around the globe in the last 12 or 15 weeks have changed our behaviors exponentially. I mean, it's gone from this to that in a literal a split second over time. And this notion of being professional is so critical to me. It's from an insurance perspective. I assure you that the professionals, the truly professional folk that are elevating their persona and elevating their demeanors, are doing not only themselves great favor and will achieve much greater success by being that way, but they're also helping an industry that they rely upon. There's a great analogy that came up a while ago, and it just happens that my brother's a golf professional. He's in the United States, and he long ago left a winter and went to a summer profession that he does all year round. So he's a golf pro at a private golf club in North Carolina. And we were talking about this COVID thing and how this has affected his industry. And this is before all the states were opening up and how they were planning to reopen. And it's incredibly similar to what we're discussing today, in as much as continuing education, because they have to sustain continuing education as part of their profession. They are licensed, so they are governed to a degree when they are in their business operations. A professional that goes to a golf professional that goes to a golf course looking for employment has to show legitimate credential that can be verified from the PGA or other associations that show that the professional is something more than someone that tells me to put my fingers on the club in a certain way or to keep my head down. But here was the point. When I was talking to Chip about this, my brother, it's every professional in the golf industry from coast to coast to coast speaks the same language. Doesn't matter whether it's a 3-hole putt course or a PGA championship course. It's about the fact that all of those professionals know that they rely on the same industry, that they willingly share information amongst themselves, because they very, very well may run into each other at not only in tournaments and competition, but just in the sustenance of supporting memberships at their own facilities, that they speak with a large enough and singular enough voice that land use discussions with their local officials or municipal officials, employment issues with state or provincial or national criteria. There's such a tremendous community in that sport that when the golf industry said, well, wait a minute, what about us? We generate a lot of money and economic input. We've come up with a strategy across the industry to reopen. If we follow this guidance, is this acceptable? They were given permission. That's why golf courses were, frankly, one of the first industries to open, both in the United States and indeed here in Canada. It's not just about the fact that it's outside and the golfers can be apart and so on and so forth. But the golf industry was very clear in how they wanted to approach this. My hope is that horse professionals will see some benefit and analogy in that and say, again, like I said before, it doesn't matter about the discipline, doesn't matter about the breed, doesn't matter about the sport, doesn't matter if you're motivated to competition or you want to be that schoolmaster coach. I can tell you from my own experience, so the coaches I worked with as a young person, 2 brilliant coaches on the property at the time that taught me. One was incredibly competitor driven. The other was very much about lifestyle and sort of just polish and horse knowledge and all those other things, which is why they made such a great team. You could sort of swap back and forth between these professionals to see benefit or cheat to reap the benefits of their knowledge. So I think the answer to the question is we need pros to talk to each other. We need a community that legitimately says we are one industry. We want lobby. We want advocacy. We want the same things in the end. We want access to animals. We want access to herds or to feed. We want access to employees that are sustainable. We want to encourage young people to come into the industry and see it as a viable career. We want them to stay in the industry because it is viable. But we have to be cohesive in that communication. There has to be a real drive to say, this is my legacy. I want to hand this to the next generation in a package that will only get better. Not one that's diminishing, not one that's falling apart, not one that says, if you're a great horseman or horsewoman, you can be in this business, because that's not enough. Knowing how a horse's mechanics work is not enough. They've got to be businessmen and women and professional in their demeanor, get the education, get licensed. People get very scared about licensing, but I think it's the best thing that could possibly happen. If government thought that we were a licensed industry, the credentials were actual, that they had some credibility, that coaches that are working with young people have had background checks. Not difficult to do if you don't have any problems. All those things that are part of licensing. If facilities allowed themselves to have some oversight, they might find some real benefits in that. And if they were acting in a common voice, it makes it much simpler then to get government's attention to say, we are an economic driver in this industry. We do support livestock, land management, employment, taxes that we contribute. And now we can participate in conversations that are meaningful to expand the sport to the best and the broadest that it can possibly be. So that's my hope, Gail. Maybe it's a pipe dream, but I think this is a fabulous opportunity for people to be thinking and listening about change, not recovery, because that's inevitable.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. It's a vision we need to strive for.
Yep.
So, Mike, thank you so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate it. And I do encourage our students to go back and listen to this again, because so many points that they can draw out and make use of and act on. So again, my sincere thank you for being part of this, and looking forward to working with you again in the future.
We'll be talking, Gail. You know it. Thanks to everybody for listening.